I don't know, there's something between my skin and my soul, and it's that American sugar
It's
gristle.
a little bit like that. You know, there's something, I think, Midwestern about it, but something not coastal, not California but it does inhabit both of those places too as well, which was the whole point of the book.
You know, the gristle is kind of in between the middle of things. You know, you think of kind of a sinew and a toughness, but also a sweetness. It's a beautiful title.
Thanks. Yeah, that was the thing that I thought when I started to see like I say in the before there, the sort of visual connective tissue in America that seemed to belie what I was hearing in the media. And for the last 20 years, this all you've heard is the separation and how people are so radically different, and the country's being torn apart. And it's not being torn apart. It's a strange place we're in right now, where we're trying to, I think, culturally understand what's real and what's not, and what's important and what's not in a bigger way, I think, than we had before. There's personal identity, and then there's a cultural identity and a national identity, and it's out there, but you have to look for it. It doesn't come easy. You have to go find it. And I think there's such a problem now with people that will sit back on their couches and just let it come to them, and they go, "See, I found it." No, you haven't found anything yet. You got to go out and see it. That's the problem.
Well, and I think you're kind of looking for it as a visual identity, like a visual sinew that everyone can see and recognize and be like, that's not in Europe, that's not in South America, this can only be in one place. You know, so many of those photos could not have been taken anywhere else.
Yeah, I was just in Spain, and it's a different thing there. It's not better or worse, but it's a different beauty there that I'm not completely. So it took a while to sort of jump into it, but you can find it there as well. You know, they have their own version of it, as every country does and every state does, but I think in the bigger picture, it's the connectivity of people. And when I would approach these towns to take a photo in a little small town with 6,000 people in the middle of Nebraska or Florida or California or wherever, I would approach it. I had to approach it from a neutral spot, and to know that there was something beautiful there, that I couldn't dismiss it like I tried to dismiss Palmdale, California early on, being an awful, like, not a photogenic, not a pretty place. But it's but I couldn't dismiss it. I had to find its beauty, and then I had to see the beauty that was there and know that it was there when I approached it, and then to be able to find its specific beauty. And then I realized that sort of to translate accidental people afterwards. So that was part of the connectivity too.
Well, thank you. That's a beautiful intro. I'm here with Toby Huss, who's an actor, a photographer, writer, painter, and star of so many things. I love you in *Halt and Catch Fire*. I love you in *Sort of Trust*.
Thanks.
And I've seen you in
*Sort of Trust* was right down there with you guys. That was Lynn Shelton's picture.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, because you've been in a ton of stuff. I mean, like, I can't even think of the amount of times that, like, you're, one of the, cops in the smoky room of the neo noir, or one of the guys in the back set. And I think *Halt and Catch Fire* and *Sort of Trust* maybe two of my favorites. And then, *King of the Hill* is great, which I guess is coming back on soon.
It's coming back on.
*Sort of Trust* has a visual language that looks very similar to your photo essay that we're talking about, American Sugargristle. I mean, I think if you look at, like, cinematography or something, that seems to be the closest to kind of what you're. Was there any kind of cross inspiration or anything there? And you mentioned Lynn Shelton in the book, in one passage, it looks like.
Yeah, she was a buddy of mine since '91 or something like that. We were in a theater company in New York together, so I'd known her forever, and she's just great. We worked together on *Glow*, and then we worked together on this thing. And Dickinson. She directed an episode of Dickinson. It's just great, and she's an old pal, and she's really talented. And like, we never got to spend as much time together. We were only, like, together on sets, and we went hiking one time, but that was the first time in 10 years. We'd have breakfast now and again, but it was never like a relationship that it's hard with her, because you want more of her, And I'm sure everybody felt that. She's one of those
Mm.
people, you're around her, you went, yeah, let's have more of this. She's just that
Mhm.
sort of wonderful kind of human that, had a lot of friends and a lot of people that cared about her and were invested in her. And that way you kind of invest in your friends. And sometimes it, it comes back and sometimes not, but that's not why you invest in that. You just do it because you like that thing, that person.
Yeah, there are some people that just have such a generativity and an expansiveness. It's just like you feel like you could just go forever almost. They're always can just kind of pulling everyone in.
Yeah,
It's
she had
interesting.
that way about her.
Well, so a lot of American Sugargristle, the stuff that you write is not quite poetry, not quite prose. It's almost kind of dreamlike, like trying to orient yourself into what you're hearing and where you're coming in is sort of interesting. They're almost like conversations that maybe you had in this place. Maybe you're just looking at the setting and you're thinking about conversations that may occur there. These characters just kind of emerge out of the ether. It's really pretty, but like your character in sort of Trust, Hogjaws, that almost seems like it would be a line from American Sugar Crystal. Some of those lines would.
Sure.
It's kind of
Yeah,
accompany.
well, I think that's what I bring to the things that I make is something that's pretty specifically me from my eye, and the times that I run into trouble are usually in a collaborative thing when you get hired by a director to do
Mm,
do the thing and you get on set and they go, no, not that, I want you to do this other thing, and I go, dude, that's not why you hired me. You
yeah.
hired me to do all this hussness, and now you're trying to squash it. um yeah, I think that I've always loved language like that, and some of the stories are um, autobiographical, or they start with an autobiographical seed,
Hmm.
and some of them are just like the one toward the end, where it's about the guy shooting the other guy to avenge his sister. That's an autobiographical story. That's my old roommate in New York, who's since
Oh,
passed away.
wow.
He had a pretty rough life, but that's what we figured happened to him. And I'd lost touch with him a little bit toward the end of his life. But uh, yeah, that's a true one. And then the penis that somebody spray painted on the Shell gas station, the
There's
abandoned
a
Shell
lot of
gas
penises in
station.
the book. I like all of the kind of dick graffiti. That's one of the more American elements to me. You don't see
Well,
those
you think
everywhere.
it's American, and then like I was in Sarria, Spain, and there's went past a building at the beginning of this walk that I did there, and there was like construction debris, dust on the outside of this window of a building that was being worked over, and of course there were just dicks drawn in it. It was
Mhm.
hilarious, and that seems to be, it. I remember I did a lot of running for a long time, ran a couple marathons, and when I first got a GPS watch, I went, "Oh, GPS watch, this is great." You go and it would load up to map my run or something, and you could see the route you took. It would draw it out.
Mhm.
And I thought, of course, like every other dude, which I didn't know, went, hey, I should run in the shape of a big cock through my neighborhood. I went, yeah, that'd be great. And then if you go look at it online, that was the first thing that every dude did. Why don't I draw a cock or some balls or some tits or something? It's
It
such a
is.
puerile thing. And there's
Yeah.
something wonderfully puerile, I think, too, and very organic and authentic about things like that you see when you're driving around the country. And the reason why I included the gas pump, not because I think graffiti dicks are hilarious, but just I immediately thought of the conversation of the two dudes who were hanging out. They were like 16, 17-year-old slackers from,
Hmm.
I think, Tucumcari, something like that. It could have been Tucumcari, but it's one of those little towns in New Mexico there. And they were just two dudes who've been out all day, and it was 4 in the afternoon, and they're not eating right, and they're not really even high. They're just sort of waiting these little wastrels at the American roadway, and the dude had a can of black spray paint. He spray painted just that lazy dude. I dig that gas pump. You what? I dicked it. Did you see it? You dicked it. Yeah, and it made me laugh every time I thought of it. And then I was driving away in my truck, and I started laughing more, thinking that's hilarious. And then wrote it. At one point, it was 4 or 5 pages long of
Yeah.
this inane dialogue. But I love those kinds of conversations that people have over things. I got stopped one time taking photos. These cops in, I think it was Georgia or something, could have been Alabama, but I think it was Georgia. I think it was over there more. They pulled me over. I was taking photos of a gas station that was over here. And there was a school, like a kids school, elementary school over here. And there are no kids outside playing. It was just a school that was there. And I took photos of the gas station and I came up and got back in my car and started driving away. And they lit me up and I pulled over and there was a cop came up on the driver's side. I was a license registration. What's that? I was see license registration. Why are you pulling me over? What did I do? I say see the license registration. I went, you can fight these fucking hillbillies or you can, I didn't do anything. I went, all right, here you go. Yeah, I pulled you over. You're taking photographs at school. I said, well, taking photos over, taking photos at school, taking photos at the fucking gas station over there. Anyway, and just then his buddy comes over on the passenger side and went, oh shit. What are these? I mean, it would have been real different story if I was black or Hispanic or something, but still, they pulled white boy over and kind of scratched their heads. I had a 2012 Volvo that was, 10 years old by that point, or 8 years old by that point in, with California plates. I went, oh, this could be one of those, those when they seize your property, if they find any drugs or anything, they can seize the car and everything you have. And I went, oh, you little fuckers. So the guy said, we just make sure there's no, you're not taking photos of the kids. I'm not taking photos of the kids, man. There are kids out there anyway. Yeah, we just don't want to, or we just want to find out that you're not or we just want to know you're not a pervert. That, oh, I'm not a pervert. Yeah, no, I'm definitely not. But that's good though, to be for. And he went, yeah, perverts. And then it became not about getting arrested or not getting arrested. It just became a game. Is see how many times I can get this dumbass fucking Georgia cracker cop to say the word pervert. And that's what it was. I went, yeah, well, you can't like you can't. Yeah, you got to watch out for those. The perverts. Yeah, you got to watch out for the perverts. It was all about listening to the rhythm of his voice and then not finding him a dumbass, finding him kind of just a dude doing his job, and just to see how many times he could say pervert. That was good fun for a average Tuesday afternoon somewhere in Georgia.
Well, yeah, I mean, you are really cracking through to a humanity of it. I mean, like the Dick Graffiti, like the just kind of conversations that go nowhere, that begin nowhere. Yeah. There's something that's I had a Latin professor that told me when they excavate like the bad parts of town from Rome, the archaeologists aren't really that excited because there's not anything like super impressive there, but the entomologists get really excited because the graffiti is what teaches us what a lot of those words mean that we don't know. Like older Latin dictionaries will have a sexual term and it'll just say a lewd act. But then in the 90s or the 2000s, they would excavate something and be like, oh, that's what it is. Okay, now we know because there's a little illustration there. And then now the dictionary is a little bit more filled in, from the graffiti.
I think that's, because I call a lot of the photos to me seem like a language, the photos that I take, that there's some language that you have, and it's the language of the sort of collective aesthetic idea of that town or that area. And you have to, or I have to be able to decode that really quickly to understand lexicon. And that's what I'm doing a lot when I go across. So sometimes the language is visual with me, and then sometimes it's written. So then I write something, and sometimes it's one word, and sometimes it needs 300 words to tell the story of this thing. And there's always, like the graffiti, there's an impression that's left, I think, in that area that sometimes you can, I don't physically see it, like I'm not hallucinating or anything, but you can see that there's some lives that have passed through there, and you can know what they are, and you might be wrong, but if you open up to that idea, whether there's something happening or not, but you open up to the idea of perhaps discovering a real life that walked through there. To me, that's the way to go.
Yeah, where they grow headstones is a beautiful photo and just such a short, perfect description. It's not a long writing. I
think that's in South Carolina somewhere. Yeah, I saw this building and went, I swerved over to the side of the road and I'd passed it. So I had to walk back because there were 4 lanes of traffic, and crossed it and walked over and just took photos. And it was shining so beautifully. And it took a year to maybe come up with a caption because I kept going back to that photo and going, what the fuck? Do I just leave it like that? No, there's something there.
Hmm.
And when I where they grow headstones, it something about the shape of it and the way uh, it was just standing on this green grass and had been mowed, and it was so pretty and had great light on it. It was shining like this grave. Yeah.
Mm.
So thanks. Yeah, that was a good one. I
Well,
got
and
lucky with that one.
your book like is like completely to my taste in art, because I like the kind of like grounded abstractness, and I like when the art is like very well thought out and kind of pointing you at something, but it's also just not adorned. I mean, it's almost kind of like folk art photography, and it's just not. There's nothing pretentious. There's nothing like. There's tons of deep thinking and feeling and ways of being, but it's just not kind of dressed up or overly thought out. I mean, it's just like so much of that kind of just connection to a place and really like feeling setting is so much of what I look for really in any media. And it's fantastic and so funny. Like just the restaurant that's just called Restaurant, and then you imagine the conversation of the people in the restaurant.
Just one of the most regular conversations. Whoa. So I think he meant Sunny Side Up. Or whatever it was. Yeah. Well, I didn't want anything to be cynical, because cynicism or irony would have ruined that book if there was even one photo that was ironic, where I thought I was smarter than the photo or smarter than the words or any words, and I was winking to the audience like, can you believe this, these fucking hillbillies? It's all over. You can share in the wonder of that photo or the wonder of those characters or those people. You can share it, but you can't talk down to it, and that's a huge problem too, because there's so many lefty friends I have out here, and I've been on the left side of the political world my whole life, and I will continue to be, but there's so many of my lefty friends out here that are convinced that the people on the right are just not as smart as they are. They're just dumber. And you can't talk them out of it. They don't, because they don't get out of LA. And if they do get out of LA, they go to New York and then they come back. And the same thing on the right. They're convinced that they just have a really great practical view of the world. And the lefties are fucking psychotics. And
it's just different blind spots, different types of projection, but
it really is. And those to me are the same people. I don't know why they vote differently. I think they should have both stopped voting and let the people in the middle vote. And
I think they're avoiding different things. Like CNN and Fox News are selling two different kind of like easy avoidant narratives that don't really make you engage with each other,
Well, yeah, but their job is not to engage with each other. Their job is to sell soap, and we think that it's a news gathering organization, and it's a money gathering organization, and both of them are money gathering organizations, and they just position themselves to rake in the most money they can from their side. So I think both of those, not to get too political here, because that's the word.
Well, no, that was the next question that I had written was like, is the book political? Not red, blue political, but there is like a call back to just a common humanity and a way of listening without looking down. I mean, like there's other books like this that I don't like because the person acts like I'm going to go put my safari hat on and go from New York into Kansas and then photograph the natives and then go back to the city. And that isn't the way that this one's written. I mean, you're really kind of embedded in these like things, and I mean, like the picture of the rock shop, it's like I could have seen that rock shop. It's so familiar. Maybe I did,
and a lot of people have taken photos of it. I've seen that online.
Well, there's so many like it. I mean, it's just so much of a common thing that it is sort of making something familiar to everybody. Whether or not we have those experiences, we're kind of aware, and like you said, not punching down, not looking down on anybody. The cynicism would have been the death to the heart of something like that.
So, it wasn't a political act on my part, because I didn't want that to in this work. I didn't want it to be anything anything near there. I think if anything, it might have been there's not a political bent, but there might be more of a spiritual bent to it, sort of an American spiritual bent, not a Godhead per se, but more this sort of collective idea we all have about what America is, and be able to touch that thing and to see that thing. I think that might be more of what it is to me.
More of a transcendence than like a, mountaintop experience.
I think so, like an Emersonian transcendent thing, that ideal that there's something mountaintopy about it, but the mountaintop is in the rock shop,
Yeah.
And if you can't find the mountaintop in the rock shop, I think you're in trouble. I think you have to be able to find the mountaintop in the rock shop or in the penises on the gas station. You have to be able to see that as if not as spiritual, it's not really a spiritual message, but I have to be able to, I've challenged myself to be able to find beauty in that. And the ultimate expression of that beauty, I think, is to be able to embrace all of that stuff. If it's the side of a Shoney's restaurant that just has a weird shadow on it, and that's it. Yeah. But I think that's as legitimate as, taking photos of the Louvre, taking photos in the Louvre or something, or taking photos in Paris. It's a different aesthetics, but I think
we've seen that photo before. We haven't seen your photos. I mean, like you have the same street in Paris, how many times has that been photographed, or the Mona Lisa, but.
Well, that's the thing I did is that I set about, actually went to Palmdale maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago now. And it's pretty rough out there. It's, I don't know if you've ever been, but it's kind of in the desert, and it's got giant, super flat. There's some mountains right on the edge, and it's just a basin. And today it'll be 104 degrees there, and it'll be 82 in LA. And it's ruthless. It's a ruthless town, and there's a lot of one-story buildings because anything over that costs too much to air condition. And there's 800,000 or 1 million square foot warehouses where they make airplanes and airplane wings and McDonnell Douglas and Skunk Works and shit out there. So I thought, taking photos out there years ago, it was hot. It was in August, and it was just wasted. Like, you really have to drink a gallon of water while you're driving around there during the day if you're getting in and out of your car taking photographs like a dummy. And I was taking photos and thought, this is not a pretty town. This is an ugly town. I thought, boy, a kid growing up here in Christmas time, and this is his Christmas. They drive down the street and they pass the 800,000 square foot fiberglass building where they make jets. And the kid gets to see that. And it's just a gray building with a white strip going through it. And I thought, well, that's ugly as hell. As in my hometown, little town, Marshalltown, Iowa, beautiful little downtown there. Old brick buildings built in. I mean, before the tornado hit it a few years ago, kind of fucked up that town. That town's been fucked up a number of times, but regardless, when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, it was beautiful. I thought, well, that's a beautiful downtown in the winter for Christmas time with snow coming in. And I thought, well, wait a minute, not to bang on Paris, but some kid growing up in Paris looks at my hometown in Marshalltown and goes, ugh, what a dump. You got to grow up in that. Oh, it's just a measure of your aesthetic to what your visual aesthetic that you grow up in. And that kid in Palmdale looks at that building and he sees some beauty there. He knows that it's not Rome. He knows that. He knows that it's not, Phuket. He knows what the story is, but he finds joy in that, and it informs his visual aesthetic. And I thought, well, can I change my visual aesthetic to find that town beautiful and towns like it beautiful and these liminal places that are like that? Can I find that beauty? Can I find beauty in that? And that's what set me on this whole kind of journey.
Well, yeah, and so much of your book is like the photographs of like the side of a building or the back of a building or the exit doors. But then there is a personality and a story that comes from, somebody was painting and they made a mistake and then they tried to correct it and then they didn't do it right, or they put this here, or, just this, not so much personality in the exit door. It's really interesting. What are you shooting on? Do you think about equipment too much? Is the technical bit not really the point for you, or
Technical bit's never been the point for me. There's guys that know a lot more about cameras than I do, and love shooting on film. And I shoot on digital, and I have a Nikon D800, an old one. I got to update my Nikon, and I have a Ricoh GR3, little handheld snapper. And then an iPhone. There's some iPhone photos in there too. Just
Is
because I
that
was
a
passing
50
by something.
prime that most of those are on, or do you mess with zooms, or is it just kind of you got a street
I mess
photography?
with some Zoom stuff, but a lot of it is I shoot with the 50, and I got a 35, and I have a 28 to 70 sort of thing. That's kind of my go-to. So I shoot a lot on that, dude.
Yeah.
And uh, I, you know, it has to. For me, it's all about the story, and I guess there's technically good photographers, but if they're not telling a story, then no one cares. I mean, really, a friend of mine sent me a photo from, he just started taking photos and encouraging him. And he sent me some photos of a homeless dude in New York that he took photos of, a dude on the street. And he was a African-American guy, and he had some tears tattooed in his face and some other lightning bolts in his face. Really rough, a rough time in life. And he said, "Hey, what about these? How are these?" And he sent me 2 photos of the guy. And I thought, what are you doing? Why did you wake up and take photos of anything today? Do you know why you took photos of a thing? You have to ask yourself that. And is it the right medium? If you want to write a play, maybe a play is the right thing for this. You see filmmakers all the time just desperate to fucking make films. And so many films I see, I go, well, that would be a great short story. It's not a film. It'd be a great short story or a cool sculpture. You could make that into a sculpture, but you decided to use film. I don't know why. People don't ever question the medium they use. And for me, I have this camera in my hand, and I'm always asking myself, why are you taking a photo of that? What are you doing? What are you doing here in a little town in Oklahoma, in July, taking a photo of that dog with a weird leg? Why are you doing that? I can always answer it, I have to answer it. It's my job to be able to answer it to myself, not to you or anyone else, but
Yeah.
I have to be able to answer it. Like when I was younger, there was this company, Walden Bookstore, that if you couldn't get a Barnes and Noble or couldn't get a legit bookstore in your town, you got a Walden Books in your mall. And in Marshalltown, we had a mall. We had a Walden Books, and they had a few books, a lot of romance novels, and a couple bestsellers, but nothing really great. But it was the only access to a bookstore we had, and there was, of course, no Amazon. And they would always have knickknacks and mugs and coffee cups and things, and they had calendars. And every year there'd be an Iowa barn calendar. Oh, Iowa barns. Oh, look at that barn there. Oh, it's a barn up on a hill. Look at it in the sunrise. Oh, look at the way the sunrise hits that barn. It'd be a beautiful barn at sunrise. Okay. And then you go to, October. Oh, look at the leaves fell around the barn. Oh, beautiful at sunset, the orange leaves around the barn. And years later, I was taking photos of a barn out in Iowa, and it struck me. I remembered that calendar, and I went, what the fuck are you doing taking photos of a barn at sunset? What has happened? What's going on here? I went, yeah, why am I taking this photo of a barn? Why does it look cool? Because it's bathed in this sort of orangey yellow light? But what, are you adding anything to the discussion about barns? No. Are you adding anything to the aesthetic idea about Iowa barns? No. Well, then why the fuck are you taking a photo of an Iowa barn? What are you adding to this conversation? And I was adding nothing. And I thought, well, maybe I need to take photos of things that I can either start a conversation with or add to a conversation. So this is the area that I chose. It's the same thing goes for guys taking photos of nude women. Like, good, I guess, but what are you doing? You just found a different girl to pose nude for you? Like, what the fuck is the point of this one? Oh, you lit her differently with shadow? Ooh, look at that. Oh, she's not super sexy. She's kind of big. Okay, we've seen that. Like, all of it's been done, which doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but
why are you doing
what
it?
of you personally are you adding to the conversation? Are you just being another dude taking photos of barns and nudes? Or are you adding something? Are you looking at this in a different way? And that's what I've tried to do with these, is look at the world that I saw in not necessarily a different way, but it was a way that it was a vein of aesthetics that I started to mine, and I'm still kind of mining it.
Well, and it looks like the things that you would have seen growing up in the 60s to the 80s on a road trip. Like, it looks like when you look out the window, as you're going from town to town, like, I think my dad and a lot of people of my dad's generation, they just love to get the family in the car and go for a long trip for a couple days.
Yeah.
And and just see the countryside. And you really would just kind of, you come to this spot, you come to the next spot. I mean, the book kind of feels like a road trip. There's kind of a Paris, Texas type, feeling, or that kind of like road movie.
Good. Yeah.
Do you ever mess around with cinematography? You like cinematography at all, or just?
I do, but I haven't done anything in that direction really. It just hasn't. I haven't pursued it, and it hasn't popped up in my vision. But it might soon. We'll see what happens.
Well, you're acting like a lot of the roles that I love. *Halt and Catch Fire*. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. I mean, to me, it's up there with *Mad Men* and *The Sopranos* in like a different way, just because there's something about watching history happen and then repeat itself, and watching technology kind of reflect emotional needs. And I mean, always try and get people to watch it and tell them like, this is about computers in the same way that The Hustler is about pool.
Exactly. It's a jumping off point for the examination of the human condition.
It's the thing that gets you to the thing. But
sure.
I mean, that role, a lot of roles, you have kind of a folksy, not quite con artist, but putting on a performance that maybe you're not aware of. Putting on a performance that you're not putting on a performance is like the kind of Toby Huss thing when you're like let loose. Is there's kind of a Carnival Barker, showman, folksy, getting people's confidence, not always for the wrong reasons. I mean, how much of that is you, or how much of that is, and maybe I'm totally misreading the performance, but is that, could you say anything about that? About those roles?
Let me understand what you're saying, that I'm choosing to portray the character that has sort of a two facets, or that I'm projecting a thing onto it.
No, I don't know exactly how it ends up there, but what I see a lot is like a character that's kind of doing a performance of not doing a performance, trying to make people feel comfortable, trying to make people feel at ease, but also sort of in a way that not necessarily manipulative in a bad way all the time, but is kind of trying to be folksy, to put people at ease, to sell something, to I don't know. I mean,
I think some of the things are possibly that, but it's not that. It's not as direct as that. It's much more opaque, and I think sometimes people fall into these kind of modes of behavior that are performative, and I think sometimes Bosworth, like in *Halt and Catch Fire*, he needed to be performative because he was a salesman. He was a real-timey salesman. So that is a lot of performance. But then back off, like the scenes I had with Mackenzie Davis, when he'd back off and talk to Cameron like a human, I think that would get dropped. And then through the arc of the whole seasons, you saw this guy kind of get crushed under the weight of how he was before and how he was before. His old technology, physical technology, CBs and radios and such, and then his old kind of performative behavior. And toward the end, he lost all that shit, and he sort of became a different version of himself.
I mean, all the characters are very stripped down by the end of that. I mean, I'm really glad that show got the last season, because it slows it down in the best way. But I mean, I guess kind of what I mean is when Bosworth is at his most performative, when he's really trying to sell something to the Texans or get into the room, it's all like, that is a performance, that is a sale, but it's like the exact same energy as the most raw and earnest moments. Like when Cameron pushes the IPO and Bosworth is like, "You're breaking my fucking heart." Or the radio at the very end where he's like, "I'm going to live to the 20th century." It's like, it's the same thing when it's the sale and the person. I don't know, that it's a really great.
He was that kind of a guy, and I thought, what does to me, it didn't make him. To me, that was his authenticity too. They're people who are. I mean, maybe he wasn't really a born salesman, but there was something in him that drew him to that way of living and that way of life and that way of kind of constructing his personality, I thought. And I know, I have a cousin who's a salesman. He's that guy in his real life, whether he's talking about his kids or whether he's talking about, getting cut in on a $4 million deal that he's doing for a software company. He's got that kind of energy, and it's now part of him. He turns it up a notch when he goes in for a sale or when I hear him on the phone. But he's kind of that guy. And I think Bosworth is that kind of a guy. I think that some animals need the way that I've run into people in my lives that need a certain level of chaos to
Mm-hmm.
feel engaged in life and to feel that they're alive when they're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with this chaos, and it makes them feel like their life has value and they have worth. So they need to keep this chaos going.
Yeah.
And if they can't find a way to turn a situation chaotic, then they withdraw and they're unhappy and they're awful. And I think maybe in an almost similar way, Bosworth was a little bit like that. Like he had to be cutting a deal somehow, whether it was
Yeah.
with Cameron or whether it was with Joe or whether it was with his own conscience and his divorce and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping it going because that's the way that guy felt engaged. He did a lot, toward the end of the seasons, like 3 and 4. He did become engaged in a real different way. Like even when Scoot goes away, even when Gordon goes away, he's engaging when he's making the chili. He's engaging everyone, and
Yeah.
he's
The cinnamon in the chili is like really great. Yeah.
And he's selling the idea of love and care and community to these people and compassion, and he's taking care of them in the way that he knows how. It's really delicately written, those things.
Well, King of the Hill's coming back. Are you on the reboot of that one? Are you going to do voice acting for it?
Yeah. They Khan is going to be played. I'm not playing Khan anymore.
Yeah.
Because they're just not going to do that. But I did Cotton in a few episodes in flashbacks, but then I took over the voice of Dale because Johnny Hardwick passed away maybe like 2 years ago now, and he was a buddy, and I did it a couple times of read throughs, and they were going to maybe AI the voice or get someone else to do it, and they said, "Why don't you just do it?" Okay, that's great. It's really humbling that they asked me to play Johnny, and it's really heartfelt stuff. Yeah, because you can't. It's funny, like when I bring up Bosworth, there's one time when I did *Halt and Catch Fire*, the wardrobe lady, she said, "Hey, we're going to get you some cowboy boots to wear." Well, fine, because I was asking for them. So they got 12 pairs of cowboy boots, and they lined them up. And they said, "All right, which one?" And she said, "I was thinking about these." And I went, "That's right, but those are his boots over here." And I picked the boots, and she went, "Well, these." I said, No, you don't understand me. I pick the right boots every time. You're very good at what you do. And they had great wardrobe people on that show. But I have to feel that when I'm playing a character, I know more about the character than anyone, and chances are I do. And it's not your character anymore; it's fucking my character. So, when I was doing Cotton on King of the Hill, it just so happens their writing was so good, or like with *Halt and Catch Fire*, the writing was so good. We agreed on what the character was going to do 99.9% of the time, but that last 0.01%, that's me, and I know what that character is. So when I went to do Dale's voice, because I'm the expert on that character, so I went to do Dale's voice. I did it, and I can sound like Johnny well enough. We probably smoked the same amount of cigarettes over our lives. We don't, well, he doesn't smoke anymore, and I don't smoke anymore either. But he was a really unique, wonderful guy. Johnny was, with a really interesting take on his character. He didn't start out as an actor. He started out as a stand-up, and he was also just a wonderful goofball and a sweetheart and a nut. So he had these really other takes on lines that were just great, and a weird voice. I went, okay.
You could never get that out of AI.
What's that?
You could never get that out of AI. You could never get the spontaneity.
I hope not, but I fear, pretty soon you'll be able to, which sucks. But, that's heartbreaking. But when I did it, I did his voice, and I got close enough, and I thought, this sounds like Johnny. That's enough. Sounds like Dale. But I'm never going to be the expert on that character the way that I was the expert on Boz or someone else, because the expert on that character passed away. Johnny's not here. So he's the expert on Dale. He took that with him, and that's the end of the story. So all I can do is try to honor his idea of Dale and try to be there emotionally and hopefully vocally as close as I can to that guy.
So you look for creatives that are going to be more kind of actors, directors, and let the intuition kind of inform the role instead of their vision or their kind of preconceived idea of what a character is?
Is it do I?
Do you
What was
look
the
for
question?
do you look for directors that are more of an actor's director that let the actor bring the intuition into the
I don't
role?
really look for directors so much as you get a project or something's offered to you and you look at it and go, oh, who's this guy? Okay, I don't know. We'll jump in there and see what happens. So it's always different. I'm always amenable to that. I just worked with a really great director in Boston shooting this thing, and I hadn't worked with him before, but I knew his work and I really liked what he did. And he was super easy to get along with him, really great, and came about it from an angle that I'd never thought of. And it's so nice to get opened up to someone you've never really worked with before and find, oh yeah, I never thought about working like that. That's great. As I think part of my job is to know my lines and stand in the right spot. But part of it is to be open to somebody else's idea and somebody else's vision and somebody else's words, and to find, like the same way that I find beauty in those photos, I have to start with the fact that it's beautiful and then understand it. So I got to start with the fact that this man or this woman knows what they're doing, and let's go forward. This is great.
So you've done stage stuff too. So when you do voice acting, when you do film acting, when you do your voice acting, stage acting, play acting, is there anything that is kind of different, or you just kind of go in and the same process for any of them of kind of finding the character?
The processes are just so different. If it's a film, it's a finite amount of time, and the luxury of that, like something like Halt or Carnival, is you're living with this character month after month while you're shooting. Great, you have a lot of time to get into it. And the same thing with the stage thing, you have a lot of time to investigate that character. And you can investigate it too with a film, and sometimes you watch your films afterwards and go, oh, well, okay. you did something there. It might not have been what you really would have done if you had lived with that character for 6 more weeks, but it's still okay. So the process is a little bit different. Yeah.
And you paint too. I mean, do you still paint, or was that something?
Yeah.
So what can you talk about that process? Or I mean, I've read I think 2 interviews in the past where you talked about painting as kind of a way to heal trauma or be engaged with the body, and I don't know if it was something that had popped up in one of the interviews that I'd read by you.
Yeah, I did. I had a solo show a couple of years ago in LA of these kind of line paintings that I'd been working on, and I come to a crossroads a couple of years before that show, and I went, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I ran into this woman who was a mom at my daughter's school, and she had a gallery. I went, well, she said, yeah, you want to do something? I said, yeah, sure. So standing in front of a canvas, not knowing what I was going to do, and for a long time I'd been drawing this kind of squiggly line, and I would draw it on envelopes of letters that I typed to friends for 40 years, and I'd do it on pieces of paper. Anybody that ever lived with me over the years, oh yeah, I remember those scraps of paper that had these little lines on them, these little squiggly things. I went, yeah, listen, I had kind of realized I'd been doing it, but not really. It was pretty unconscious. And then about before the painting, about 5 years, I've been painting for 20, 30 years around just on my own, but I started some MDMA sessions, some therapeutic MDMA sessions with a guy in New York, and been researching that a lot. And then when you go through that stuff, I don't know if you've ever experienced something like that, but it's pretty
Was it helpful? We work with I'm a social worker by license, so we help prepare people for either doing MDMA or IV ketamine or psilocybin sometimes, and then they come back, but they it's more of a preparatory thing. We can't administer it.
Right. The MDMA stuff is pretty profound. I found it to be, but I haven't done ibogaine, or I did ayahuasca down in Costa Rica a couple summers ago. That was pretty profound as well. But the MDMA therapeutic process was releasing a lot of stored trauma, I found, and it was good. but then I was standing in front of this canvas and remembering those lines, started squiggling this line. I went, this is not a legitimate way to make a painting.
Mm.
To me, it didn't seem like a legit. I went, that's not a line. It's not the beginning of a painting. That's just you do. Well, can that be enough? And I didn't know if it could be enough or not. And well, you have to explore that because you're feeling it in your body. So I had to explore it. So I started painting like that. I went, son of a bitch, this is looking like a thing. This feels right. And I kept going, and my body kept going and adding color and adding things to it. And I painted a lot of big canvases like that. And I think there was a physicalized trail. It seems to me, speaking of language and lexicon and following those signs, that this line that I've been drawing for 40 years, that had been appearing in my life for 50 years almost, and that was connected to, had a real squiggly line connection directly to some childhood trauma that I've been working through MDMA sessions. And some guy at 89.3 in LA did a interview with me, and he made like the headline of the article about he's working with childhood trauma. And I went, well, that's kind of a little bit cheap, but I get it. He had to call it something.
Well, that's what I was going to call the title of the podcast when we were
exactly. Us deals with childhood trauma by doing a bunch of shit. Yeah.
Most traumatized man alive, Toby Huss.
Exactly. Yeah.
Extra.
I think everybody has that. It was just at that point in my life, and still now. I just did another session a week ago, last Sunday in New York. I was just there with this guy. It was my 9th session, and in the last 5, let's see, it's 25, so 6 years. Yeah, 6 years I've been doing it. But it wasn't to find like childhood trauma useful. I wasn't going about it like that. I wasn't intentionally using it as fuel or a tool or
it's just there. You can tap into
a reaction to it. It was really the examination of that stuff and how it's been physicalized in my body and how my body was releasing it. And it's going to release it on your own, or it's going to release it with a paintbrush or a camera flick or in a character or something. And not to say that everything comes from that source, because it's not the source of everything. I don't think trauma is the source of everything. A lot of the times, it's how you cope with these things that can be a lot of the source of something. There can be unconscious things that are the source of it too. But, I think a lot of coping mechanisms to deal with whatever you've dealt with in your life, if you want to call it trauma, or just being a kid getting raised in America and having a great family, you're going to find ways to cope with your life and use things to your advantage. And sometimes that will let you ease into becoming a tax accountant, because that's exactly what you want, which is super legitimate and very fulfilling for you. And sometimes it makes you want to paint, which can be legitimate and fulfilling as well.
Well, I think I'm not like a huge fan of that like tortured artist myth that the trauma is the source of the creativity, but I do think that what happens is that the intuitive function gets kind of bound up with trauma in a way that you have to go back through the trauma to access the intuition under it, and that kind of until you do that, there's places it takes you back to a place where you remember things that you've kind of forgotten, and
that's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, that intuition might be, well, maybe the intuition is there, but the trust isn't there with yourself.
Exactly.
So maybe
we avoid
maybe it's a matter of going back in there to that place and finding that initial trust you had with yourself before it was, broken, severed with your parents or the world or whatever.
Well, I think that intuition and trauma both come from that, really subcortical brainstem stuff, and we can't tell them apart. And we get kind of afraid of them, and the real kind of healing somatic work helps you tell the difference between the intuition response and the trauma response, and you have to go back to the trauma response to kind of do that. But I mean, when I do somatic work with my patients, I tell them, like, whatever this thing is, if your heart feels like a black hole and it's under your shoulder blade, or the gut is locking up, or the arms want to just kind of fight and elbows want to fight, whatever it is, make contact with that. This sounds crazy, but you will find your medium. Try and sing, try and write a poem, try and journal it, try and draw it. And while you're there, and you're going to go on a lot of failed dates. A lot of these are not your medium, but there's going to be one that you just all of a sudden, it's got to come out that way. and you never would have known that was there. And it is wild. I mean, these people that have never painted, never written, never whatever, they come in with this thing, and it's beautiful, and they're better. But there is something about the contacting the somatic and then going all the way through it, and it just kind of has what it wants to say. And I don't know, like some people do that with a line in painting, and other people kind of connect to it different ways. But it's it is neat that is in everybody. If you're,
I think it is, and I think a lot of people, like you say, they don't allow themselves to engage with that, just because, not because they're terrified or anything. It's just not in their worldview to do that. Maybe they love golfing, for fuck's sake, and those 4 hours of golfing every Sunday with their buddies. That's their way to kind of be connected with that thing. And if they thought about the world in a different way, maybe they would take those 4 hours and say, hey, wait a minute. What if I started painting something 180 degrees from where they're sitting at this point? Maybe they try this other thing. I don't know if that's in our culture to really do that. More now than ever before, I think, to be able to try that 180 from you. I think these alternative modalities are really coming online now in a way like never before. There's more people that, if you bring up MDMA at a party or MDMA therapy at a party, people go, oh shit, I heard about that, and that guy and this and Rick Doblin and all that, and it starts to go, and more people, as opposed to even 4 years ago, more people now are aware of it at the very least, and if you get in those algorithms on Instagram, that's all you get for days on end, and it can bash your head in a good way to just open you up to this other idea about the world, that there's something besides lots of titties.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with lots of titties, but God, when you get stuck, if you look at some girl who's standing around in her bikini on your Instagram stories or something, and she's some influencer or something, if you look at that too long, God damn, the next couple of weeks, that's all you get. And it's just awful.
It's what the Instagram, the algorithms want to point you back to the thing that I guess the lowest common, or not the lowest denominator for the most people.
It's the thing that doesn't get you to the thing.
Yeah.
It's the thing that pushes you away from the thing. It's the opposite of halt and catch fire.
Well, we do brain spotting and emotional transformation therapy. Brain spotting uses like an eye position where there's like a pupil reaction you're looking for. It's kind of a newer form of EMDR.
Really?
A lot more
Never
effective.
heard of it.
Yeah, and then ETT is weirder. It uses these like devices that can make like 14 billion different colors, and then you control the flicker rate. But you can't really perceive a flicker rate over 200 hertz. So it's like people have these wild reactions to these flicker rates, but they don't see anything changing. They don't know that I'm controlling it. And a lot of that stuff, I just never really would have ever thought that would work. And now it's like being, kind of validated. Some of it is validated in research, other, places it catches on clinically. But a lot of people are like, well, you should do psilocybin or something. And it's like, the red tape of that in Alabama, I don't want to mess with. But even if it was 100%, green light, I'm not going to get, a Baptist minister to take mushrooms, but I can make you look at a stick and you'll peel the meat off your soul and talk to God. So those reactions are wild.
It'd be so great if you could. You might need to work on that. You might need to get some carnival barker in you to get that Baptist minister to take psilocybin. That's the fucking truth. Because when he starts going in there and seeing the world all colorful lit up like that, it's going to change his idea about what he's doing in the world.
Well, but people are just less afraid. They're more willing to look at a stick. That some people come in and they want the mushrooms. But I guess that would, maybe that could be a new type of televangelism is, like pastors that have taken drugs are now, eat a strip of LSD and then give the sermon for 3 hours.
I think that's great.
See what comes out.
Yeah. Who was that major league pitcher? What was his name? That no hitter on after he'd taken LSD.
I don't remember.
There was I forget his name in the 70s. He dropped acid one thing, and they said his wife went, "Hey, you got to pitch you, and I'm pitching tomorrow." She went, "You're pitching today? Oh shit!" And he goes, "Doc Ellis, I think it was Doc Ellis." Yeah, he pitched tripping. Yeah.
Did he know that he that it had worked out for him, or?
Oh yeah, yeah, he was
Yeah.
aware, but he was fucked up. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Doc Ellis pitched it. Not saying that everybody would pitch a no hitter while they're training, but God damn it, it worked for Doc, I guess, that day.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. You know, you have any future projects that you want to pitch? We'll definitely link to the book. And
Thanks. Yeah.
is there kind of any other rabbit holes you want to go down, or new projects you got in the works that you
There's a
can talk
couple.
about?
There's a couple of pictures coming out in August that I'm in. One is called Americana. This guy Tony Toast wrote and directed a really great indie feature. Lord is in it, and this guy Eric Dane is in it, and I have a small part in it. But it's a good kind of rural American thriller about a ghost shirt, a Native American ghost shirt that's very valuable, but everybody wants to get their hands on. And then another movie that's coming at the end of August, I believe, or mid-August, and the beginning of August, a movie called Weapons is coming out. And that's a really great, this kid, Zach Kreger, he's in his mid-30s or something, but so he's a kid, yeah. But he did this movie called Barbarian, a horror movie that some people have seen. And man, this one, Weapons, is a giant leap forward creatively and storytelling wise and filmmaking wise. It's just a great leap he's taken, and it's a really dark, really kind of slow moving, hypnotic, pull you in kind of thriller, almost horror movie kind of. It's not a real, stake through the heart horror movie, but it'll really mess you up. It's great. It's a great picture, and they were going to release it in January or February, I think Paramount was, and they saw a cut of it and they went, oh shit, we got to get this out in the biggest weekend of the summer. Come on, beginning of summer. So that'll be a fun one. So those things are coming up.
Okay. Yeah. So Weapons is coming out this summer or next summer?
This summer.
This summer?
Yeah, Weapons and Americana are both coming out this August.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'll link to it if there's a page up for it.
Yeah, man, cool.
Anything, kind of about your history? I mean, you've worked with a lot of people for a long time. Anything about like childhood history or just the kind of career trajectory you feel like is relevant or he kind of comes into this conversation, or you just kind of let the past?
I mean, look, we can cap it now, or we can talk for 3 more hours. So let's cap it now rather than, maybe we'll do it another time. We'll talk more about it.
Yeah, well, we'd love to have you back on if you ever or want to promote anything new or just kind of talk about another angle on trauma therapy, life, art,
cool, man,
growth, creativity. We just say the topic is consciousness, so we can fit a bunch of stuff underneath that umbrella.
Exactly. The topic is life. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for your thoughtfulness
pleasure,
and your work. It's always a pleasure when I see you in something. I know I'm in for a treat.
Cool.
But Toby Huss, please check out the book American Sugargristle. We'll link to that and then the upcoming movies in the show notes.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.